So welcome everyone to Alumni Founder Series today. My name is Neha and I'm the Outreach Fellow here at the Entrepreneurship Center. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm super excited to introduce you all to our amazing alumni founder in just a few minutes. But first, I just want to give you a quick rundown of what the format's going to be like tonight. I'm going to start off by introducing our guest, and then we'll engage in a brief interview so everyone can hear his story and get a sense of what his entrepreneurial journey has been like so far. And then we'll head into a Q&A where you'll all have the opportunity to introduce yourself and ask your own questions that you may have. Our questions for me will largely be based on our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking on our wall over here. We use these as the central ideas for everything we do here at the EC because we believe they're essential in developing the skills and mindset of an entrepreneur. So we'll place them in the chat for those online to take a look as well. Can everyone on Zoom hear us? All right, with that being said, I'm really excited to introduce you all to our guest, Erin Gilani. Erin graduated from William & Mary with an MBA in 2017, where he was the chairman of the Mason School of Business Honor Council and received the Health Sector Path of Distinction. Before attending William & Mary, he got a degree in biology from Hampton-Sydney College and a certificate from Harvard Business School. Before joining medical school, Erin worked as the associate CMK manager in Procter & Gamble, where he restaged the Aussie hair care brand and launched a new line within Old Spice hair care. Following his time at William & Mary and P&G, he's on track to receive his Doctor of Medicine degree from the Indiana University School of Medicine in 2022. In 2020, Erin founded Prescribe It Forward, a nonprofit that provides free mentorship to disadvantaged pre-medical students by matching them with members in medical school. In just its first year, Prescribe It Forward has developed a network of over 1,400 mentors across 140 medical schools and has mentored over 2,600 students and is continuing to garner national attention. Erin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't join you all in person. I feel like it would have been nice to kind of be able to get down to Williamsburg. It's pretty, cold in the Midwest, but nonetheless, here we are on Zoom. And I'm doing really well and, excited to see everyone out here. I feel like you'll have a really cool and creative space and, it's really awesome to see everyone show up. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, even if it is virtually.
Sure.
So let's get right into it and start at the beginning. Growing up, what were some of your interests and how do you see them having shaped your entrepreneurial side of yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask because I think that's always really important to kind of where we end up. So I am, first generation American. My parents came to America in 1988, so kind of had to figure this thing out for themselves. And similarly, I just kind of was along for the ride with them. My dad, started, working in local grocery stores and things like that, and eventually saved enough to buy his first gas station. And I remember joining him when I was a little kid, about 8 years old. And so always had this kind of, business entrepreneurial mindset with him, but, in the same situation had a deaf and blind brother that my parents came to the United States with. And so I was constantly in the hospital growing up. I could, smell the hospital to this day. I was there every weekend. So those are the kind of the two worlds that I lived in. I was never particularly good at science, which is kind of funny. But I always wanted some kind of crossroads between being able to take care of people, but also being able to kind of express that entrepreneurial mindset and creativity.
Yeah, it's great that you've really created your own path that combines those two passions. So how did your time at William & Mary shape your personal and professional journey?
Yeah, so I thought, when I went to William & Mary, I was one of the few in my class directly out of undergrad. And so I think the biggest thing that helped shape me were my classmates. I was able to be around people and kind of know when to lead, but also know when to act like a sponge, right? Because I had people around me who had been in business for 10 years, 20 years, people who were in the military, all the major General James Wright fellows were a great asset as well. So I think William & Mary really set me up with the right people that I needed to be around in order to help kind of propel me into the business world. When I think of, just how I'm able to think through things today, a lot of that is because of my professors like Brent Allred and folks like them who, have a unique way of approaching problems. And then again, just, nothing replaces real world experience. When I got to my internship at Procter and Gamble, I thought, I would just, pick a page out of a book from my first year MBA studies, and that would help me solve problems. But you really learn a foundation in business school, and you can get through your job or your career without it. But it's really going to help you kind of understand like what to pull and what skills and what talents to pull and when. And a lot of it is also knowing, when to ask for help. I think that was a really big component too that William and Mary taught me.
Yeah, that's something that's pretty common. We've heard around a lot of the alumni that come back here that the William and Mary community really shaped their experience.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's something we're really hoping to cultivate here.
Yeah.
What's something you wish you took more advantage of while you were here?
I wish I was a little bit more involved. So I did, the honor council because that was one thing that was important to me. But there's such an abundance of opportunity at William and Mary. But it's such a fine line of, learning kind of, what those opportunities are and what's good for you versus spreading yourself too thin and kind of sacrificing the reason why you're there, right? Which is get a good education, to set up a good career for yourself, things like that. So, I had classmates who were on both sides. I had classmates that were heavily involved, but not really too focused on the job search type of thing. And I had classmates who were the opposite, who really missed out on the experience. So I think that's kind of really tough when you're presented with an abundance of opportunity. How do you learn to say no to some of those?
Yeah, that leads a little bit into my next question. So after getting your undergraduate degree, it seems like you shifted a little bit more towards business with your roles at P&G and NASA and market strategy. So did you always know you wanted to combine business and medicine, or how have you managed balancing those two passions?
I think so, and I think just because of the training paths for physicians, right? It's very linear. It's very like, you go to college, you take the MCAT, you go to medical school, you do residency, and so I knew like it would be kind of a non-traditional path. But as you all know, the United States spends more as a percentage of GDP on healthcare than any other country, and doesn't really have the outcomes to show for it. And so, inevitably, healthcare is business, is big business. And it's a place where we struggle. So undoubtedly the two go together. And I thought about, if I could do kind of my MBA early on, which is a lot shorter than, being a physician and going to residency, I'll be kind of better suited to be able to think about problems in a unique way, right? So like instead of just, prescribing patient X the medication, thinking about, why does this medication cost what it does? Like, why am I having problems getting it? Like thinking about the operations problem of like, why does it take so long to like authorize this medication and things like that. So you just kind of act like a jackknife, I would say, and kind of approach problems uniquely.
Yeah, definitely. Prescribe It Forward is a pretty unique combination of those two. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to found Prescribe It Forward? How did you really discover that opportunity?
Sure. So medical school is kind of funny where like you don't really have a whole lot of free time. And so at the end of your second year, you take this exam called Step 1, which is the first of 3 parts of your board exams. And ours kept getting canceled because of COVID. And, I think mine got pushed off for about 4 months. And so that's one of the rare times where I had some time for some reflection about, what this journey kind of meant to me. And I remember, coming into medical school thinking, man, like everyone must be like me, like, the first in their family to be a doctor, like having a hard time figuring it out, finally got there. And then I remember talking to one of my friends and he's like, yeah, my dad's a heart surgeon, my brother's an orthopedic surgeon, my mom's a dermatologist. I just kind of showed up. And I thought that was funny just because, neither good nor bad. I thought it was different from what I had experienced as a first in my family to even go to college. And I was like, man, like, what if there was a way where students could, of, disadvantaged backgrounds, so whether they're first generation or low income, underrepresented, whatever it may be, who don't come from communities of physicians or families of physicians, could go online and put in their info and actually get matched with a mentor who's in medical school, who actually comes from the same background, so they can actually understand their story and resonate with what they're going through. And get guidance on what classes to take, how to study for the MCAT, how to apply to medical school, and just kind of help be that one person that they have yet to have in their lives. And so I think again, like if I hadn't had an MBA and if I hadn't really worked at Procter and Gamble, I don't think I would have just gotten online, made a website, kind of figured it out. I was like, if we help 10 or 15 people, that'd be great. But I think last I checked, I think we're over 2,800 students. And we've given out thousands of dollars in scholarships to help them with MCAT prep and things like that. And it's just kind of one of those things where if you feel like, there's a need, you don't have to be all fancy and raise money and head to Silicon Valley on a jet to go fix it, right? Like you can just sit online, you can kind of sketch out a plan and go for it.
Yeah, the success of Prescribe It Forward is definitely pretty impressive, and it seems like it's still growing. Have you faced any challenges with founding a nonprofit organization versus a for-profit one?
Yeah, I think it's different. It is nice to know that when you have a nonprofit, it's easier to get people on board, right? Naturally, because there's a natural understanding of what you're trying to do. Every dollar you collect is easier just because they know it's not going into a pocket of a shareholder or something like that. So on that front, it's easier. I would say it's a little bit more technical as far as raising money. So once you get above the $50,000 threshold of raising money, there's a lot of reporting to be done and things like that. And also, when you're not selling a service or a product, you have a lot more. You have to be a lot better steward of money to the people who are able to give you some, right? So always giving them updates on how you're doing, what you're doing, what your plans are for expansion. So it's tricky because you want to show them that their money is helping you grow, but then you also want to keep that pipeline open in case you need more. So that's been tough. And then I think what's been good is like it kind of it keeps the gas burning at night. So like this project is my 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. project some days. And I think I think the passion is different when it's a nonprofit and it's for a good cause and you have a lot of good people supporting you versus say for example like I'm selling a T-shirt, right, that's going directly in my pocket. So very different intrinsic motivator.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned earlier that you thought it would be a success even if you helped 10 or 15 students, but obviously it's grown a lot more than that. And it seems like you'd also be interested in going beyond pre-med and medical students into dental, nursing, and PA students. What advice would you have for our entrepreneurs here about scaling their ventures?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing about scaling any venture is having the right people behind you, right? So when I had this idea, I immediately thought I can't do this by myself, and I think that's kind of like the biggest moment of maturity that I've had in my career was realizing that I'm a medical student. There's no way I can pull this off by myself. And when something does grow so big, you have a sense of responsibility for these people, right? So you can't just say, "Oh, it got too big. Sorry, I'm only one person," and shut it down. Like Prescribe It Forward, fortunately, is now so big that it has to go on forever. Like we have an obligation to these students. So as soon as I had this idea, as soon as I made this like kind of mock website and sketched out a business plan and everything like that, I called some of the people I admired the most. So these included, people who I interviewed on the medical school trail with. One person who I became really good friends with, he drove me to the airport. I called him up and said, "Hey, I'm really working on this." I met up with a friend on Twitter who I didn't even know at the time and was like, "Hey man, like I know you're always tweeting about like, having applicants message you if they have any questions about their personal statement or their application. Like I know helping people is really important to you. Like this is what I'm working on. What do you think?" So I got 12 of those people around the country to also help me kind of like geographically get, spread out. And I said, "Hey, this is what I'm working on. Are you interested?" And they all were interested. And I think at that point, I knew I had a team behind me. So whenever I had something going on, I could always lean on them to kind of share the workload because again, like, breaks kind of come by happenstance in medical school. And then of course, like when you're scaling the organization, I'm now, finished with medical school. And so there's a great group of people who are second year and third years on our leadership team who I know I can pass the torch to. And that's another thing about scaling, right? Is learning how to have the bandwidth because when we started, I was entering every single like entry form into a Google sheet and typing every single applicant by name, and it was just a disaster. And so I had to really lean on my team, and so we have a team that does that every single week. so that I can focus on growing the organization. So again, like, you know, I know as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you always kind of want to have your hand in everything. But if you can truly kind of be like, you know, 1 degree of separation away from the day to day, I think that kind of helps hone in your leadership skills.
Yeah, collaboration is one of our pillars here. It's super important, and it's great that you realize that and are able to lean on those other people to help you out.
Yeah.
So given your team of people at Prescribe It Forward, as well as your pretty extensive network of mentors and mentees who all come from different backgrounds and experiences, have you ever had to deal with any conflicts with that, and how are you able to resolve them?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily conflicts, right? I think something to remember as an entrepreneur and founder is that no one is going to love your idea more than you, right? And that's good and bad. I mean, that means like someone's not going to take care of it the same way that you are. Like, I mean, my friends have all been, you know, wonderfully committed to the organization, but I mean, I'm still the one who checks things at 2 in the morning to see how they're going, right? Just because you have so much stake in it. And so I think sometimes that's hard. I think you can always, you know, work on spreading that amongst your team, because the more they feel involved and the more they feel like they are contributing, the more they'll be like that. So that's been difficult. And then I think also just, you know, sometimes finding the time is tough, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of entrepreneurs start off with their, you know, their venture as kind of their second gig after their normal job. And so, you know, times are tough, right? Because it's hard to really communicate with the right parties late at night or things like that, or getting things done when, you know, all your vendors are closed and things like that. So I know it's, you know, just logistically it becomes a little tough, but I think it's always worth it.
So speaking of figuring out your bandwidth, where do you see your health headed in the next few years? Would you want to expand Prescribe It Forward, or take a step back and focus on being a practicing physician?
Yeah, so you know, it's hard to say. I think I'll always have, you know, a hand in Prescribe It Forward. I think, you know, one of the goals that I have for myself is, you know, if I'm an effective leader, I can teach someone to lead this organization the same way that I would. And so that's kind of my goal for the coming year is finding someone to serve as new executive director who's already on the team, and really kind of coach them throughout the summer, throughout the year, while I kind of work on my training as a surgeon. But you know, that's the biggest thing is like, if I can effectively teach someone to run this organization the same way that I do, that's effective leadership. And if I kind of always hold the reins and you know, don't let anybody do anything all the time, I'll burn out and soul with the organization. So we'll see how it goes.
Great. And then just a couple more questions.
Sure.
When you were getting your undergraduate degree, you also founded a bone marrow donor registration drive for DKMS US. What lessons did you learn from that experience that maybe benefited you when you were founding Prescribe It Forward?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of also a catalyst as to why Prescribe It Forward happened, right? So I was a sophomore in college, or a freshman, I think. It's been a while. And I remember, you know, reading about a friend of mine. His name is Alex Paulini. He's an orthopedic surgeon now. But he donated bone marrow to someone he didn't even know. And I thought it was such a great story and such a, you know, an act of selflessness. And I had not been really educated on the topic at that time, and I feel like a lot of people weren't. And so I said, you know what, let's do a bone marrow drive. We'll have a bunch of like educational sessions. We'll sign up a bunch of people. And you know, again, similar to Prescribe It Forward, if we sign up 5 people, sure, that's 5 people the registry didn't have for potential matches, right? So it's fine. And I think we matched about, or we registered over 1,000 students my 4 years there. And I just received like another email a couple weeks ago that said like, hey, Aaron, like someone was a match to be a bone marrow donor from your drive back in 2013, right? So, you know, those little efforts still continue to pay off to this day. And I think we've had about 3 or 4 students actually donate bone marrow. And it's one of those things, again, right? Similar mindset. Like, you don't need, you know, like a Harvard degree and venture capital funding to go out and you know, help somebody. All you had to do is kind of do your homework and feel like if you can help 5 or 10 people, you've made a difference. And if it gets something bigger than that, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. So yeah, again, like small scale, small ball kind of expectations, I think kind of allowed that to happen and allowed Prescribe It Forward to happen.
It's great to see that you're making a real tangible difference in the world, and that really
Appreciate it.
anyone can do it too.
Absolutely, anyone can do it.
All right, and then just one last question
Sure.
from me. Based on your entrepreneurial journey, which one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking would you want to work on leveraging more, and why? And I'll send them here in the chat so you can see them and the rest of our participants on Zoom. For those of you in the hub, once again, they're on the wall up here if you want to take a look.
Yeah. So I think, when I was reading these, there was one that kind of stuck out to me, and that's openness to risk, right? Because there's some of these pillars that are very intrinsic and some of them that are a little bit more extrinsic, right? So like grit and self-direction are things that a lot of great founders have, but how does that translate? And a lot of people who have great minds, who have problems to solutions and can really make a difference, often just don't, because they feel like they're afraid to fail or there's too much risk involved, right? And I think that's what stops most people. But I think if you kind of have to think about it like watering a plant. You have to do it a little bit every single day. And the next thing you know, when you're ready to launch that big venture, you have built the confidence to be able to go and do it. When I think about, again, like Prescribe It Forward, I think about, what does failure look like? Failure for me was like, okay, no one uses it. That's fine. And success for me, again, was very small too. It didn't have to be the next greatest thing in medicine for it to be worth my time. Same with the bone marrow drive, right? If one person came in and swabbed their cheeks to help be a bone marrow registered donor, then great. If not, I had nothing to lose. So just being open to risk. It's hard, right? There's financial risk involved in a lot of ventures. But the biggest thing is just being open to it, right? Like not being afraid to fail. Because there's so many ideas that have just kind of fallen by the wayside because no one has decided to go through with it. So always, be open, figure out what you can do. Play small ball. Like I just made a website by myself that cost me like $10 a month, and did it. So I didn't have a lot of risk, right? I didn't go out and recruit a designing firm to make a website and things like that. After Prescribe It Forward got big, that's when we started recruiting coders and developers to do our websites and do our back end and things like that. Just again, like play small, pretend like you're, a bootstrapped entrepreneur. Then you don't have a lot to risk. And so then you'll be more likely to go for it.
That's some great advice for all our entrepreneurs here.
Sure.
All right, I think we're in a great place to start the Q&A. So if you're here in the hub, feel free to raise your hand and then introduce yourself and then ask Erin a question. If you're on Zoom, same thing, you can raise your hand or send it in the chat and we will ask it.
Oh, this isn't really a question, but my swim team uses the Aussie shampoo and conditioner every single day in the locker room.
That's awesome. We love that. Appreciate it.
Erin, can you hear me from way back here?
I can, yeah, really well.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming out. I appreciate you taking the time to do it. It's Graham, by the way. It's good to see you again.
Me too.
So you mentioned openness to risk is something that you'd like to apply more. How could we learn how to apply that ourselves? Like, what are some things we could do to help gain practice and ability to apply that? Any ideas?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what you're trying to do, but I think just again, like thinking like a college student or thinking like someone who doesn't have resources is the best way to do it. I think a lot of times when we're kind of in the big walls of business school or we're in a big company. When I was launching Hair Code, we had an unlimited like a blank check basically to launch the app. And then so when I got to launching Prescribe It Forward, I did not have that. I was a medical student with about $500, right? So I think, the circumstance that you're put in really helps dictate kind of your approach and your confidence, and then subsequently your risk tolerance, right? So at Procter & Gamble, if we lost $500,000 building an app, fine, so be it. That's not even going to show up on the balance sheet at the end of the day. But for me, for Prescribe It Forward, to help, to pick out, a coder or a developer and really put all this money behind it was a big deal. So again, I think it's like putting yourself in the shoes that you're, the current context that you're in, and then operating within those confines, I think is the best way to do it.
Thanks.
What character traits help you balance like your workload beyond collaboration?
Yeah, I think I think the biggest trait for me is like, learning what gives you a little bit of that energy, right? So like perspective, I would say. So for example, like medicine is a very, it's a very rigorous field. You're working all day, but prescribe it forward makes me happy, right? It's my only access to entrepreneurial mindset. It's my only access to any kind of creative latitude in medicine. And so I think just finding that thing that you're really passionate about, and then subsequently being able to have that perspective of what it means to you, is kind of the best way to keep it going.
We have a question from Aaron on Zoom.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Aaron. um, hey, so I'm one of the James Wright scholars, and
Yeah.
we just started our innovation and entrepreneurship class this week actually. And one trend that I noticed was a lot of us military guys seem to self-identify as lacking in creativity or lacking in the ability of creating ideas.
Sure.
And I just wanted to see what techniques that you use that have been successful in you creating new ideas for either prescribe it forward your business or any other ventures that you have been interested in pursuing.
Yeah, I would say, one of the early things was surrounding myself with the right people, right? So like, conversely, like I learned a lot from the James General Wright Fellows because they were, tacticians and could really diagnose the situation. And I liked how they thought about things very linearly. And those things I appreciated. And I think, in our relationship, they might say that for me, they found it was interesting that I kind of had a clear lens about everything, right? I didn't come with any kind of, corporate background. I didn't have any kind of, traditional mindset about what it meant to launch a business or be an entrepreneur. And so I was always very radical in how I thought about things in the classroom. And so I think that's the best way to do it, right? Is surrounding yourself with people who think differently. I know I gained a lot from that experience. And I really think just like that way, people can kind of like expand their horizon, right? Like I didn't need to join the military and have 20 years experience like some of my classmates did to help glean some of the things that they learned. And so that was really invaluable. And then as far as just like, more tactical things, I think just like a lot of like just sitting down, thinking and sketching out a problem, right? So like, I mean, when I think of medicine and prescribe it forward again, like I just had an experience. My friend was like, "Hey, medical school was pretty easy for me," and I was like, "Man, that wasn't for me. It probably is for a lot of other people." So I just sat down on Twitter and I read some people's stories and sent out some emails about, "Hey, do you kind of feel this way too?" And they're like, "Yeah, I really do." So really kind of doing that like very lean startup kind of research. That we're not starting research, right? It's just like being a person, being observant. So those are kind of my recommendations.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for making out time to speak with us. My name is Frances.
Sure.
I'm an international student, so I want to have to know what the process, just an overview of what the process was for you to register your not-for-profits, and how demanding was the process and the financial implications.
Sure, that's a great question. So again, that was something I knew absolutely nothing about when I started prescribing for it. I was like, okay, I want this to be a nonprofit, and that was about as far as I got before. I was stuck in a loop of like what kind of nonprofit and what state to apply for and things like that. So the first thing I did is I called people who I knew who were in the space, right? Like, and I'm not talking about like, the CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project. I'm talking about like small nonprofits of, very recently launched, like people who would actually know these things, right? I think people immediately are like, I have to go to the biggest, baddest thing to get some advice. And like a lot of those people don't really know how to set up a nonprofit, right? They kind of just showed up in the C-suite 10 years later. But yeah, I called people. I said, hey, like this is what I'm thinking. What kind of nonprofit structure do you recommend? How do I typically go about this? How long does it take? So now from me to you, I kind of looked online and said, okay, I want to file as a nonprofit in Indiana. And I just kind of looked through the IRS and things like that. And then from then I was like, what does 501c3 status mean? And so I read about tax exemptions and tax implications and things like that. Filed for that. All in all, the process only took about a month. I understand it kind of varies depending on what state you file in, but it really came pretty quick. I was actually pretty amazed. And then, from that point, you have to continue, updating how much money you're collecting to the IRS every year and things like that, and being a good steward of money. But I would say, in summary, it wasn't that as big of a logistical battle as I thought it would be.
Sorry. Hi, this is Crystal Mershon. And again, thank you. I know you're going to hear that a couple times tonight. Thank you for being here with us and sharing
pleasure,
with
Crystal.
us. I am also a James Wright Scholar, and while still serving, a couple of my girlfriends and I started a nonprofit. It's called the Urban Dream Initiative, and we are still in what would be considered the startup stage. But we do have some questions, which is, what do you find is an effective fundraising engagement strategy, and do you leverage strategic partners?
Sure. So it's nice to meet you. I'm really glad you're kind of also similar in the space, and I'm happy to help. I'll drop my email in the chat and we can probably also connect. Happy to help further. But the biggest thing that I thought was, before raising any money was, is this a story that people resonate with, right? Is this something that people can say, man, like, I get this, like, how can I help? And we knew our target, right? Our fundraising target was physicians. It was every physician in a hospital who ever thought that, they could use some help from, someone who is a current medical student to kind of help them through the process. And so, we kind of, before we even started collecting money, we just wanted to make sure our story was really sound. We wanted to make sure that we were helping people. And we also wanted to make sure before fundraising that we weren't, fundraising dependent. We tried to limit our operating costs as much as possible. We tried to be very transparent about what we wanted money for and why. We paid for all the development on the front end and back end out of our pockets. So we could be very transparent about, hey, every dollar you give us is going to go to a student to help them with scholarships, right? Like, point blank, period. I think when people are donating money, they're very hesitant about, how much goes to operating costs. There's some nonprofits that spend 70 to 90% of their fundraising on operating costs, and none really kind of goes to the main initiative. So that's really important to people. And then I just reached out to people who I thought, kind of guided me along the way. I said, hey, like, I'm working on this project. If you have any advice, please let me know, and kind of keeping them updated. So they had kind of some, some stake in the situation. And then when the time came to raise money, I let them know and say, hey, this is what we accomplished so far. This is kind of what we need going forward, and your help would get us there. Right. So you kind of have to do it as like, we're going to do this, whether we have your money or not, but your money would really help us. That's kind of the best way to fundraise, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure.
Yeah, I was wondering, what is the biggest roadblock you've hit, and how do you come over that obstacle?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest roadblock during this journey has just been, sheer time, right? There's been months where I've had a lot of exams, or I've had boards or things like that. And I tried to combat those by saying, again, like leading the team, right? So no matter what happens tomorrow, if I'm super busy and I can't touch anything on Prescribe It Forward, the organization's primary goal should be that it matches students, pre-medical students with medical student mentors, right? So that is the success criteria. So I thought about, what is the way that no matter what happens to me, Prescribe It Forward will always be able to fulfill this initiative, right? And so that's kind of why I delegated that to the team. I took that off my plate because it was getting very difficult to match students one by one. So that was kind of the biggest roadblock, was figuring out how to ensure the organization's main initiative is still there day to day, regardless of kind of the fluctuations in our personal life.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hi Erin, thank you for being here. I'm Nikki Smith. I also work with Crystal. I'm on the marketing team. So I wanted to ask you about how you go about marketing your nonprofit organization. Do you focus more on word to mouth, kind of organic marketing, just the steps that you're taking to make it more effective and have more people on your platform?
Sure. Yeah. So something I'm really proud about with our organization, is we have spent $5 on Facebook ads. That's it. Right. So in 2 years, we spent $5 on marketing. And the reason again is because if your story is something people can really resonate with, then you'll be surprised at how much organic traction you can get. Twitter is really big for us. What's called med Twitter is where, students and residents and faculty will always talk about things, and we'll try to keep an eye out on people saying like, hey, I need help reading this application. And then, we'll kind of tag ourselves and let them know that we offer these services for free and that they shouldn't pay for them. Every now and then we get some help. There was an article kind of around when we were launching that, some admissions consultants were charging $500 to read your application essay. And then so that kind of blew up because we were like, hey, no one should have to pay for mentorship. Like, that's ridiculous. There's plenty of people who are well qualified, willing to kind of volunteer their time and pay it forward. And so, you should kind of come to us instead. And so we got some organic traction there. Biggest thing is, just kind of talking where our people are talking as well. Listening to kind of what's going on in medical education is important to us. Listening to what's going on in the application process is important to us. So will we ever spend money on advertising? Probably not, right? Because the segment is also so specific and small. I don't know if we'd ever get any lift from it either. So this is kind of why organic growth is so important to us.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have another question. So how involved are you or Prescribe It Forward in general in facilitating these connections? Do you kind of just match mentors and mentees and then let them go their own way, or are you more involved in that?
Yeah, so what was really important to me before was, how do we, it was tough. It was a big conversation we had. We said, okay, do we vet every single person who wants to be a mentor? And then we said, that's probably not the right way to go about this, because at the end of the day, if someone's qualified to help and they want, and they're going out of their way during medical school to sign up for this program and help a student, like, that's good enough for us. So the biggest thing for us was then from that point, okay, we let them join. Now, what does quality control look like, right? So we have a mentee relations team and a mentor relations team that always follows up, within 1 week, within 1 month of the match, and says, hey, like, is this everything you hoped it would be? Are you getting what you need? Is there anything you feel like you're not getting? And really trying to be good stewards of that relationship, because we want people to recommend Prescribe It Forward, right? We want people to have an expectation that when they sign up, they're going to get someone who's going to listen to them, who's not going to, belittle them if they're not qualified or for like a certain program that they want, and someone who's really going to coach them throughout the journey. And if that person is not the right fit, that we're going to, rematch them and get them the right fit. So, that's been really important to us, and our matching process has gotten more complex. So we've taken a lot of information. We read every single bio. We've had, students who are like, single mothers or, nurses, transitioning to medical school, just like all kinds of backgrounds. And so we really thoroughly read through and make sure like, hey, are we really putting this person with someone who can understand their story? Because if we're not, like, pairing someone who's the first in their family to graduate from high school or college with someone who's a, third generation surgeon legacy is not helpful, right? They fundamentally can't relate to each other. So that's really, the matching process is something that, is the most important to us.
Do you have a favorite story about a connection you've facilitated or an impact you've had?
I do. And I think, we've had, before I say that, I think the best part was seeing our first medical student match, and he matched at Georgetown University. It was probably the coolest thing ever. And then match after, success story after success story came in. We've had mentees who got into medical school, who happened to be in another city, across the country, actually set up time to meet their mentor for lunch, which I thought was really cool. And, I think just the connections that we're building, as opposed to just, reading an application or reading an essay, I thought was amazing. One of my personal favorite stories is, just the people that I recruited, right? Like the people I wanted to join Prescribe It Forward, a lot of them were my mentors. My first ever mentor in school was the first person I called to, help me with this program, because what better person to be a mentor to others than the person who's a mentor to me, right? So I think that's, it's been really great. And you have to take those little wins when you're a founder and really build upon them.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, I was hearing your response to Nikki's question about your marketing strategy.
Yeah.
How that's not really something that you guys tried to do because of the nature of the niche market that you're after. And I was kind of wondering how supportive have the medical programs have been in connecting you with their students and trying to get the mentorship, because obviously those medical programs will also benefit from having their students benefit from your mentorship program.
Absolutely, yeah. So we try to do like a very like boots on the ground type of thing. We have so at kind of our biggest programs that have up to 300 medical student mentors just at one medical school. You know, we've tried to introduce something called mentor reps, who are people who's kind of serve as like our pipeline at that individual school. So for example, I think we have about 150 mentors at Duke Medical School, and we have some mentor reps there. And what they do is, you know, their job is to get all of the incoming Duke medical students, kind of host a little session and kind of tell them what the program's about, hand out some swag and things like that. And then also go to the local undergrad institutions in that area and kind of help give them some information saying, hey, like we're from Prescribe It Forward, you know, reach out to the pre-med advising group, pre-med interest group, pre-medical advisors, things like that, and just say like, hey, like, you know, we're here if your students ever need this. So it's kind of like we operate in a bunch of little pockets really. And that kind of, you know, ladders up to the success that we've had.
Great, thanks. I guess I just had one more question
Sure.
before you answer some other questions. If there's a way, what's the best way that we can support Prescribe It Forward from students that are current that we're here hearing your story, hearing about your business? How can we best support you guys?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I mean, the biggest thing is just, you know, thinking to yourself, like, do I have someone who's ever wanted to be a physician, right? Like ever even thought about it, right? Whether they're, regardless of what their MCAT score is, regardless of what background they've come from, like we all know someone who's ever thought about being a doctor. And our goal at the end of the day is that every single person who's ever wanted to be a physician or had a dream of becoming a physician, to let them know like, hey, we are here. Like, I want you to never go to medical school because you don't know what to ask and who to ask it to. So that'd be the biggest help, is just, you know, making sure that people know about Prescribe It Forward, so that, you know, there's never a student who was extremely capable who didn't feel like they had the support to do it. Appreciate you asking. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know. Now we can all be ambassadors for Prescribe It Forward as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
Crystal, do you have
Yeah, just another quick one. Thanks again. So you mentioned the sheer volume. It sounds like just at Duke, you're looking at 150 mentors. And so what relationship management techniques are you using? Are you using software? And this is both in terms of the mentors and the mentees and any volunteers in between.
Yeah, so we use a lot of, so for the matching process, we use a lot of automation as far as like, you know, once we match students, we have like checkpoints built in. So like, it'll send automatic emails like 1 week in, 1 month in, 6 months in, about like how the relationship is going, which we then manually follow up on to not lose that touch. And then we also use, MailChimp was one of the first things I had used. So we use that for a lot of our updates. You know, we just launched a new scholarship for students, and, you know, that pays, you know, for a large portion of their like MCAT prep and application fees and things like that. So we use kind of like segmenting within MailChimp to help reach out to them. You know, we're very transparent about how to reach us. So we've had people DM us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, Facebook. We've had people email us, things like that. So I think just like, again, just being accessible too is really important, right? Like we would never be the type of, you know, organization, no matter how big we got, to like have a line where you like hold to talk to someone. I know it's easier said than done, but like it's really important to us, right? Like we're all about access, we're all about transparency. And so we want you to be able to reach us with any questions that you might have.
Okay, so I think I missed, did you say you were using a database? You said a specific name of a database?
No, so we had one custom built that has an Amazon backend, an AWS backend, because we really needed like a custom solution, right? So basically what this dashboard does is it pulls in every single student who applies to be a mentor and applies to be a mentee. And what it'll do is it'll kind of tabulate kind of all their inputs, like what background they're from, what school they're from, things like that. And it kind of puts it in like a side-by-side panel for us to kind of swipe through and kind of figure out the best match. It kind of functions like Tinder a little bit, I guess you could say, in like how, like how the platform works. But then we read each story, we figure out who the best mentor is. And then we have a bunch of, once we hit match, it has a lot of automation built in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, any final questions for Aaron?
Hi, my name is Andrew. Excuse me. I'm an MBA student as well. When you were building your team, you mentioned you looked for people that you admired most. I assume some of those were your friends.
Yeah.
Just curious if you had any advice on how you maintain your separated friendship, and when stuff got really stressful, starting up Prescribe It Forward, how you separated those and managed those relationships.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it's something that I kind of had to figure out as I went. I think when I started early on, I think, when I say friends, like these are people who I admired and had a friendship with, but I think I met all of them in kind of a peer or collegial sense, right? Like I knew they were all very capable of having that kind of relationship as future physicians. And so I think that's kind of an important thing. I knew they kind of had the capacity for themselves to kind of, make that line in the sand. But you're right, it's tough. When something's not being done properly, there's a lot to consider, right? It's that they're volunteering their time, that you have a personal stake in the relationship as their friend, but you also have, an obligation to everyone that you're serving in the institution. So how do you, how do you balance all those things? And I think that's kind of, the $1 million question, right? Like that's the tough part, because you want people you can trust, you want people who, their body of work, but you also very clearly want to make sure, that you're clear about, why we're here and roles and responsibilities and things like that. So I would say the first step to be successful is kind of identifying that that's the case, right? Like it's going to be difficult. And then whenever you're having a situation, I think it's much easier. It's easier said than done, but you really have to nip it in the bud early, right? Because otherwise it just it just starts to avalanche into a situation that becomes uncontrollable. So always try to be very clear about your expectations, roles, and responsibilities up front, to kind of always, be able to reach out to them and kind of the anticipatory capacity that you're reaching out to them for, right? Like when it's talking about Prescribe It Forward, it's very like business-like. When it's talking about just like, hey, how's your weekend? It's very different, right? So kind of letting them also understand like when you're really focused on what you're talking about versus when you're more just kind of like catching up with them.
Good advice. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, thank you, Aaron, for dedicating your time to us today and giving us some pretty valuable insights. It's been really great to hear about your journey.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, everyone. I know it's always hard to come to a talk at the end of the day, so I really appreciate y'all being here, and drop my email in the chat. If you ever have any questions, just please let me know. I'm happy to help anyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. If everyone else could stay for just a couple more minutes, we have a few quick announcements. And I just sent Aaron's email in the chat, so if anyone wants to get in contact with him, it's aaron@prescribeitforward.org for anyone here in the hub as well. All right, so if you didn't get a chance to do it in the beginning, please scan the QR code up here on the screen to check in. As you attend more events, your points balance grows, and you can redeem it for swag like sweatshirts, t-shirts, tumblers, hats, Chick-fil-A gift cards, and even more. So everyone can earn points, but you do have to be a member to redeem them. So if you're not yet a member, we'll put the member QR code up here in just a second as well. Also, we would really appreciate some feedback. Also another way to earn points if you're looking towards getting some of that swag. We want to make our events the best they can be, so your voice is really invaluable, and both of those links will be in the chat as well. And then lastly, just a heads up about some upcoming events here at the EC. We'll be having our next AFS on April 14th in 2 weeks with Ross Perkins from Mason-Dixie Foods. And tomorrow we'll be having a special rocket pitch focused on arts and entertainment. So that's at 2 p.m. And then the Friday after that, we'll be returning to our regular general rocket pitch. And then also Wednesday, April 13th, that's 2 weeks from now, we'll be having another community hangout from 6:30 to 7:30. And that concludes the Alumni Founder Series for today. Thank you all for coming.
I accidentally wrote